All right, everyone, good afternoon. It's great to see so many people joining us and from all over the country. Before we begin, we did want to acknowledge that these are pretty turbulent times for our country with recent spikes in unemployment and school closures. And we know that some apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs may be temporarily closed due to the COVID pandemic. We also know that apprenticeship and other earn and learn programs are effective models for focused training and advancement for the American workforce within a range of high growth, high wage industries, and that they present a particularly compelling model for resiliency. Apprenticeship programs connect learners to the workplace in ways that no other training programs can, and they provide income during training, which makes individuals and communities more resilient over time. So now, more than ever, it's important to think about how we can build resilient and inclusive education and training models that serve our employers and all of our workforce, which is the primary goal of the AIM initiative. We have a great opportunity here today to learn from two workforce experts who can speak to what works when it comes to apprenticeship and VR programming, and who are coming to us having weathered other economic downturns. So we want to thank Mark and Ralph for joining us. We'll talk about them later. And we look forward to learning from you and connecting with our attendees. Just to walk through the technical controls. So we have our audio controls. I'm sure a number of you have been on several Zoom calls in the last few weeks. So there's the chat function, which a lot of you have used. You can raise your hand if you need a technical question, you're having trouble seeing or hearing something. And also we do have closed captioning. This webinar will be recorded as well, so you can revisit it another time. And there is a Q&A button if you have a specific question that you want to get right to the presenters. So we can go ahead and field those questions, which we'll have plenty of time to do that towards the end of the webinar. Next slide. So we're going to go ahead and welcome our speakers. Next, we have Mark Genua and Ralph Roach. So Mark is now an associate director at JFS, and he was formerly the director of apprenticeship strategies at Philadelphia Works. We also have Ralph Roach, who is the manager of the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation at the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. So we're really happy to have both of these experts joining us today to speak about what they know around inclusive apprenticeship. For the agenda, we're going to continue on with our introductions. I'm going to provide a quick refresher of the AIM initiative as well as the previous webinar. And then we're going to transition into the meat of the conversation, which is designing inclusive apprenticeships. We're going to talk about some key questions that we have and hear from our guest speakers on just general reflections and experiences they have that can help us inform our work moving on. Again, there will be time for question and answer. Feel free to add your questions in the chat or through the Q&A. My colleague Tara and Caleb Van Docto will be helping us with that. So to just give a quick walkthrough of what the AIM initiative is, so it's an initiative funded by the Office of Disability Employment Policy, and the focus is to expand access to occupational skills training, credential attainment, and job placement and retention through apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship models for working age youth and young adults with disabilities. Next slide. The goal really of the initiative is to learn as much as possible about how apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship models are serving people with disabilities and what opportunities there are to grow. This has been a 2-year initiative, and we're in the thick of our 2nd year. And really, we're doing this in a number of ways. We're doing this through research, evaluation, pilots around innovative apprenticeship models in high growth, in-demand industries and sectors. So if you've been a part of this community of practice for the first webinar, or if you're a part of our newsletters, or if you're not, we have a lot of resources online, and we will be posting information on that, and we'll have plenty of resources forthcoming, and we'll be updating you on that. Next slide. Just to give a quick overview of what ODEP is, they're a wonderful partner in this work, and they are the only non-regulatory federal agency that promotes policy and coordinates with employers and all levels of government to increase workplace success for people with disabilities. So I'm not going to go into too many details here to introduce the next slide and the pilots that we have, but we did have a competitive process to identify pilot sites, and we're currently working with intermediaries to engage and support this effort. So for example, we are working with Apprenti to support pilot efforts around inclusion with Microsoft and Amazon. We're also working with HCAP at sites in New York City and Philadelphia around healthcare, their healthcare career advancement program. And we are also working with the Wisconsin Regional Training Partnership, WRTP, and CAST, which is a leader in universal design and accessibility, in engaging pre-apprenticeships in a number of states currently focused in the greater Milwaukee area, and that's through our Industrial Manufacturing Technician Apprenticeship Program pilot site. Next slide. So the overall goal of the initiative through these pilot efforts is really to build apprenticeship pathways to drive pipelines for youth and adults with disabilities into high demand, high paying careers, to help us gain insights on how to scale up inclusive apprenticeships and contribute ideas and actionable practices to the national conversation on apprenticeship. Next slide. So as part of these efforts in the initiative, we have three kind of main tiers of how we've been engaging in the work. That's through site level technical assistance with our partners at Wheelhouse and Social Policy Research Associates, as well as JFF Jobs for the Future. And we also have an internal network, which this is a part of. And we also are doing research and outreach. So as part of this, in the summer, we'll be releasing several research briefs that are coming from interviews in the field, as well as findings from the research pilots themselves. Next slide. So if you joined us for our first community of practice, really the emphasis there was helping folks understand what apprenticeship models currently look like and how we're thinking about apprenticeship, but also why we chose apprenticeship as a mechanism here for this work. And so we introduced the AIM initiative. We provided foundational components to design registered apprenticeships and pre-apprenticeship programs. And we also talked a little bit about youth apprenticeship and new sector apprenticeships outside of traditional. Next slide. So now what we're going to be doing is we've helped people in thinking about how to develop an apprenticeship and just kind of the general characteristics of apprenticeship. But now we want to kind of dive deep and think about how can we make sure our programs are inclusive. Next slide. Just to quickly talk about some assumptions here as we go through the work. We know that a lot of you joining us are seasoned experts in this. And so just to kind of create some level setting, we have a definition of inclusion here from SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. And that is the definition for inclusion as the achievement of a work environment in which all individuals are treated fairly and respectfully, have equal access to opportunities and resources, and can contribute fully to the organization's success. So in this context, for this webinar, we're really thinking about inclusion broadly as a way to understand what are other elements of apprenticeship design that we can pull to help inform our work for people with disabilities. In the context of work-based learning and apprenticeship, this can include thinking about universal design, accommodations, accessibility, trainings and coachings, recruitment, and other ways that can benefit workers with traditionally perceived barriers to employment. And this is not limited to people with disabilities. And if you want any additional information around best practices here, we do have a resource library and can help you identify some resources specific to your needs. Next slide. So as we're approaching today's session, we did have some key questions that we introduced to our speakers, and we're really looking forward to having them kind of expand upon what they've been doing in the field and what kind of opportunities they see as effective best practices for engaging and supporting this work. These questions include, what are some immediate elements to consider when designing an inclusive apprenticeship or work-based learning program? What are some low-cost, high-impact strategies to make existing programs more inclusive? How have programs engaged partners in the work, as we know that that's an incredibly important characteristic of successful program models? Which specific occupations or industries could offer more promising apprenticeship opportunities for people with disabilities than other occupations or industries? So where are we seeing momentum? Where is opportunity? Things like that. We also recognize that the attendees probably have some examples and experiences that they may be willing to share. And so we welcome your contributions via the chat. I would like to introduce our first speaker. So this is Mark Genua. He is an associate director at JFF Center for Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. Prior to joining JFF, Mark was the director of apprenticeship strategies at Philadelphia Works, the workforce development board for the city of Philadelphia, where he was responsible for providing technical assistance for and strategic implementation and investment in registered apprenticeship and registered pre-apprenticeship programs across the greater Philadelphia region. Mark has assisted several small to large employers and organizations in creating, enhancing, and implementing registered apprenticeships, including program design and registration preparation, related technical instruction, and recruitment partner connections, and funding identification and management. Prior to Philadelphia Works, Mark has worked in workforce and community development in the greater Philly and New York regions, including at the Philadelphia Youth Network and Southwest Brooklyn Industrial Development Corporation. Mark holds a BA in sociology from Shippensburg University and a master's in urban policy and planning from Tufts. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Jackie. Happy to be here. You can go to the next slide, please. So as Jackie mentioned, currently I'm at JFF. This is actually starting off my second week at JFF. So just a very short time ago, about 2 weeks ago, I was at Philadelphia Works. It seems like a lifetime ago with the current state of things, but it was only 2 weeks ago. So I'm really going to speak from the perspective of my work at Philadelphia Works and the work in terms of apprenticeship of what we've been doing in Philadelphia, as well as the Southeast Pennsylvania region. So as Jackie mentioned, Philadelphia Works. We are the Workforce Development Board for the city and county of Philadelphia. Workforce boards can look different throughout the U.S. So just for some clarification, Philadelphia Works is a separate 501c3 nonprofit. But we are connected to the local government here in Philadelphia in that the current mayor of Philadelphia, appoints our president and board of directors. So Philadelphia Works can be seen as a quasi-governmental agency per se. So as any workforce board, we are the recipient of the various federal and state workforce funding, mainly that comes from WIELA, or the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and TANF, or the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families. We also are the recipients of various discretionary grants that come down from the federal and state level. So utilizing this different funding, we work with various partners in the field to develop and operate various workforce programming. While at Philadelphia Works, myself and my staff, the apprenticeship team there, was responsible for the majority of apprenticeship funding that came down from the federal and state level, both through discretionary grants and through the WIO, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Next slide, please. So just to give everyone some background about what's been going on in Philadelphia and the Southeast PA region over the past 5 years, I would say, ever since I would say the new modern apprenticeship movement has come about. As you can see on this slide on the right is some of the occupations that Philadelphia Works has registered or that were soon to be registered in the region. And as you can see, especially from this list, it's getting really outside of the traditional skill trades occupations and really into the healthcare and IT. And I would say in the region, IT and healthcare are the two non-traditional industries that have seen the largest growth in terms of apprenticeship programs. But also we're starting to see growth in the hospitality sector as well as the manufacturing sector as well. And the investment made in terms of the region within the past 5 years, it's been about a bit over $8 million and continues to grow. And this is through, again, various federal and state discretionary grants that the region has received. A couple big ones. The region was the recipient of a $3 million American Apprenticeship Grant. That was a nationwide grant, and where the region is winding down that grant, as well as the state has been really supportive and really put a lot of funding out there for apprenticeship programs throughout the state of PA. But then also looking at our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funding, utilizing some funding through there to support apprenticeship program, but then also foundations have started to invest in apprenticeship programs in the region. And the occupations you see on the right, ranging from direct support professional, early childhood education teacher to computer support specialists. These are programs that are with different sizes of employers, so larger employers that have a nationwide presence, and also smaller employers that just have a local presence here in the Southeast PA region, and also different models, some just single employer sponsored programs, and others group programs where a number of employers come together and work together on apprenticeship programming. Next slide, please. So within the past 5 years, the Southeast PA region has all sorts, as you can see, of activity going on in terms of apprenticeship programs being enhanced, new ones being developed, pre-apprenticeship programs being developed to attach to these apprenticeship programs, and focuses on different populations that can be served through this apprenticeship program, be it individuals with disabilities, which I'll give two specific examples in a bit, but then also focusing on different populations that are underrepresented in apprenticeship programs like youth, both in school and out of school, women, especially in the skilled trades and in the IT sector, and other populations that face multiple barriers to employment. So with all this activity going on, all the different partners in the region decided to come together and form the Apprenticeship PHL Collaborative, as you can see right here. So this collaborative was really meant to coordinate the apprenticeship work better, to leverage resources, to braid funding from various sources that other programs are accessing, which other programs may not be, and to really advance this work in a more coordinated and efficient fashion. Some of the major partners in this collaborative are the local workforce development boards, obviously in Philadelphia, but also in the counties right outside Philadelphia. You have educational partners, community college and traditional four-year education institution. You have training providers. You have career link representatives, which are one-stop centers known nationwide, and obviously employers. So all the major stakeholders in apprenticeship programs are involved in this collaborative. And the three main goals of this collaborative is to increase outreach and engagement about apprenticeship programs, provide technical assistance and capacity building in terms of educating employers and organizations to get programs up and running, and also research policy and funding for apprenticeship programs. I see in the chat box is the the website that is currently going under an update as I was leaving Philadelphia Works. And then also they're involved in various social media channels. And the first major body of work that was funded by the state that the collaborative is working towards is this PA Smart Southeast PA Region Registered Apprenticeship Ambassador Network. And it's through this program that the collaborative is training CareerLink staff and other workforce development professionals on how to be what they call an apprenticeship navigator. So really embolden workforce development professionals to go out into the field, speak to employers, and get them interested and engaged in apprenticeship programs. Next slide, please. So right now I'm going to give two specific examples on apprenticeship programs here in the Southeast PA region, and how one was adapted to accommodate additional individuals with disabilities. But then the second example will be a program that was initially designed from the onset to include individuals with disabilities. So the first program I'm going to highlight is called the Urban Technology Project, or UTP for short. So this program has been in operation for about 10 plus years in the region. So it's one of the oldest IT registered apprenticeship programs in the nation, and has been running for quite some time, like I said, a decade plus. So this program, it's a partnership between the School District of Philadelphia and a nonprofit organization called Communities and Schools of Philadelphia. And really, these two entities came together to better serve the youth who were coming out of school district high schools who were interested in the tech field, but then didn't necessarily have the means or interest to go on to a traditional four-year college to get a degree to engage in this pathway. So the program, apprenticeship program, focuses on young adults ages 18 to 24. And there's two parts of this program. There's a pre-apprenticeship and a registered apprenticeship. And a lot of the participants in this program are, the majority are School District of Philadelphia graduates, but then also they also recruit from other areas, and it's not necessarily a requirement that they have to attend a school district school. So interested individuals will apply to get into the year-long pre-apprenticeship program, which is AmeriCorps funded. And through this program, through the year-long program, they'll learn and get exposed to various digital literacy skills and tech support. They'll shadow folks in school district positions, and also apprentices in the field. And then through this one-year program, they go on then to a 2 to 3 year long computer support specialist registered apprenticeship, where they're working at school district schools providing tech support needs while also attending community college classes. Next slide, please. So this chart kind of gives you an example of some of the ways and some of the ways that this program has adapted to accommodate various individuals with various disabilities that have come into their program. So as you can see, it runs the gamut of the various disabilities that have come into the program. Be it, at the top, they've had some pre-apprentices and apprentices that are hard of hearing or deaf. So they've adapted the program to get access to and use of sign language interpreters and any other programs that can accommodate these individuals. And then also, making sure work sites are fully accessible and that provide a supportive environment for anyone with any type of mobility or physical disabilities. But then also I want to highlight any individuals coming in with mental health disabilities. They have worked with various therapists that are affordable and that offer a sliding scale for individuals with a lesser income, especially in this apprenticeship program. Next slide, please. So moving on to my second example. This example is in the healthcare field, and this is for a direct support professional pre-apprenticeship to registered apprenticeship program. This program is a group, what they call a group-sponsored apprenticeship program. So the nonprofit District 1199C Training and Upgrading Fund is the sponsor of this group program, and they have multiple employers that employ direct support professionals in this program. This program has been up and running for about 3 to 4 years now, And again, it focuses on what they call a youth young adult population, ages 18 to 24. As you can see, the pre-apprenticeship portion, like most pre-apprenticeship program, provides that upfront coursework, training, and exposure, in this case, to the direct support professional field. Also helps individuals get baseline credentials to get into this occupation, like a driver's license and also other baseline certifications. And then upon entrance into the about year to year and a half long apprenticeship program, they are obviously employed as apprentices working at the various employers involved in this program. But then they're also, for their related technical instruction, they're attending classes both with District 1199C Training and Upgrading Fund and Jefferson University. So at the end of this program, they end a year-long apprenticeship, not only as a fully trained direct support professional, but with 24 college credits from Jefferson, which helps them give a leg up in this field. Next slide, please. In terms of the goals of this program, as I mentioned, as opposed to the Urban Technology Project program that has been adapted, this program, in terms of accommodating individuals with disabilities, it was designed at the onset because one of the things and the employers involved in the initial cohort of the program, not only were they interested in working with young adults, but specifically young adults with what they call lived experiences, especially with the field that they're working in. So they themselves, are experiencing or have some type of mental health or developmental or intellectual disability, or they have a close family or friend that they've either cared for or interact with some kind of disability. Because these employers felt that young adults with lived experiences can be the most passionate in this field and really thrive in this type of occupation, which is, as most folks know, is traditionally a tough occupation to be employed in. So really at the onset and design and development of this program, it was really keeping in mind about who the participants were going to be and really how to design and implement the program with these participants in mind at every step of the way. So that be it refining the competencies so they can be attainable and accomplished, developing the materials to recruit individuals as well as under employers. Keep in mind about making sure they're accessible to all different types of populations and young adults. And then also developing, and I think this is the most important point, developing and providing enhanced support network, for these individuals at every step of the way. So really this program, the employers, the sponsor, District 1199C, the City of Philadelphia's Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, Philadelphia Works, and the employers came together in a series of meetings and calls to really plan out this program and adapt it after it was up and running to make sure the goals of this program were accomplished. Next slide, please. So kind of, providing those two examples, some of my key takeaways from working with these partners in these programs on adapting and designing programs that can accommodate and support individuals with disabilities, obviously at the top, including, every stakeholder in the program from the start when they're first engaged, because, you really have to have buy-in from employers, from your participants, from your educational partners in this program. So they should be involved in the initial design and implementation of this program. The second point, as I alluded to in the District 1199C example, developing this multi-layered support network. So, making sure participants have not only support at their employer location, but wherever they're doing their related technical instruction, and wherever else they go in the program, making sure there's multiple people that they know that they can go to and really, receive that support to make them stay in and thrive in the program. And that alludes to the third point, creating this open environment in which participants, in this case apprentices, don't fear speaking up or bringing up these critical issues, to your attention. If they're having trouble, they're not keeping it quiet and struggling in these programs. But making sure, from the onset when participants first enter the program, you're creating an environment where apprentices and pre-apprentices can feel feel free speaking up and mention if they're struggling and doing ways to address that. And then to the last one, adopting contingency plans for participants. So, in a sense, being proactive instead of reactive to situations that might come up, and plans to accommodate different individuals, be it, if they have a different learning style and they're uncomfortable in bigger group settings, making sure there's ways that they can learn the same information in a smaller one-on-one session. I'll kind of leave it to that and turn it back to Jackie and Ralph for the next presenter. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That was a lot of really great information. And I just want to remind folks that are listening in that we will be providing a follow-up with additional information around the topics kind of mentioned today, things Mark brought up, as well as reminding people where they can find a recorded version of this session. So thanks, Mark. I know that we'll be coming back to you and your takeaways after we hear from Ralph. So next slide, I do want to introduce Ralph Roach. So Ralph is with the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation in the Bureau of Central Operations for Pennsylvania. He's the current manager of the Office of Vocational Rehab, and he previously served as the chief of the Policy Planning and Evaluation Division and as an Eastern Employment Outreach Specialist. Ralph has worked with the Pennsylvania OVR since 2008, when he started as a vocational rehabilitation counselor in the Reading Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation Services in Western Berks County. Ralph has 35 years of community-based human services experience, and he has expertise in student assistant work, as well as a behavioral specialist, outpatient therapist, and CRP employer outreach and job coaching. He is a certified rehabilitation counselor and Pennsylvania licensed professional counselor who earned a Master's of Science in Psychology from Shippensburg University and a Bachelor's of Arts from Messiah College. Ralph, that was a mouthful, but I am so happy you're here, and you can take it away.
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, my mom made me write all that stuff, and she's very proud to hear that announced today. And that was a difficult bio to go through, but I appreciate your patience. Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Mark, for that excellent overview of Philly Works and the great things happening in the city of Philadelphia, the county of Philadelphia, which is a city. I, of course, represent the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, the public VR program in Pennsylvania, of which you may know there are 79 such programs spread across all the U.S. states and territories. In Pennsylvania, the public VR program, known as the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, is a combined agency. And just some very quick information as we pause on this current slide. On an annualized basis, the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation in Pennsylvania probably engages around 70,000 individuals. And that's spread across our 39,000 individuals in an active plan status in both general VR and in our blindness and visual services program. It also includes the individuals we are working with through our business enterprise programs, individuals who are blind, who are vendor operators or small restaurant operators in state set-asides. That also includes the students we have been working with since 2014 under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act's pre-employment transition services, as we actively engage the state, local educational authorities and transition programs to work with students who may yet become an actual customer and apply for services in the future. Of those individuals we touch, about 39,000 are in active plan, and annually around 7,000 to 9,000 individuals go on to achieve a career outcome. And I use the word career outcome to emphasize public VR is about helping people find that career, just like our workforce partners. It's not just a job. We want a career that will produce a livable wage and provide ladders and access into the middle class where individuals are capable of moving up through job skills to achieve higher levels of earnings and opportunities. Our typical wage in Pennsylvania is about $13.28 an hour when individuals achieve an employment outcome. And we have been spending about 12.3 months in assisting individuals to move from the point of eligibility to the point of an employment outcome. Next slide, please. So we knew that the apprenticeship space was an important area to be in. And part of the way we know that is because one of the duties I've had is being the division chief of the business services and outreach division within OVR, in addition to policy and planning. And many of the employers have been telling us they know there's a lot of job applicants out there. They know that VR has a lot of talent in our pipeline, but they're looking for specific skill sets. And many employers have told us that earn while you learn programs, internships, pre-apprenticeships, and apprenticeable pathways are really good ways to find talent that will help meet their needs. They really want people to come into their organization at a level where they have skill sets that are important. And also they said one of the benefits of apprenticeship from their perspective, this is comments from employers, HR managers, is the fact that the apprenticeship and internship approach really builds important soft skills and social skills that lead to success. So our first step as an agency was to work with our colleagues within our state Department of Labor. Within the Pennsylvania Department of Labor, we have the Apprenticeship Training Office, which is the actual office promoting and working with our workforce partners, Title I and the American Job Centers, to really bring employers and sponsors together to have a registered apprenticeship or pre-apprenticeship. So in early 2014, we ramped up some of those discussions. The second step in our apprenticeship space was to come up for a strategy to respond to many of the high priority occupations within the Commonwealth. We have certain sectors, as I'm certain you do in your states, that are just booming and have been just searching everywhere to find talent to meet their needs, to operate their business or organization. Examples include things which I'll mention in the next slides, but examples include industries in the supply chain area due to our rail and interstate highways and a lot of space available for large warehousing, our close proximity to the Philadelphia port, Baltimore, and New York. So healthcare, another booming sector. Hospitality has been large in Pennsylvania. Certainly the service sectors, if we think of retail, education, and related industries. Next slide, please. So we saw apprenticeships as a way to align the skill development and earn while you learn strategies with these employers when we would collaborate with the Apprenticeship Training Office to create a pre-apprenticeship or registered apprenticeship that would be inclusive of the VR talent. And we know that we would do that in these high priority occupations, not as a standalone rehab program, but in the spirit of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act as a partner, Title IV, with the American Job Center, they're called CareerLink in PA, and our 22 workforce development regions. When you actually are effective in building a pre-apprenticeship or registered apprenticeship, you can open up the local workforce training funds for any WIOA served person, whether it's a dislocated worker, a homemaker, as Mark mentioned, a TANF recipient, et cetera. And I apologize about using those acronyms again, but we know that the VR pipeline is also benefiting from that as well when they can access an individual training account or we can pay for the apprenticeship. So we put a focus on looking at sponsors and registered apprenticeships in the construction trades. An example out in an area north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, there was has been a large emphasis on Marcellus shale and a cracker plant that actually produces energy out of the shale and other vast natural resources that are available. The Shell, SHELL oil company was involved in that. And just in building that plant alone, there were over 500 individuals needed across things like carpentry, electricians, and heavy equipment operators and other apprenticeable occupations, just to build that plant and then to sustain the plant as an energy operation in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a vast number of valleys and highways and roads, many of which are being rebuilt. We're an old state, an old industrial state, and there's a great deal of construction going on across the Commonwealth and a high demand in that area. And of course, as Mark has mentioned, in our urban centers like Philadelphia and also over in the western part, Allegheny County, where the city of Pittsburgh is, Philadelphia, about 1.5 million residents. Allegheny County, about 875,000 residents. We have a lot of commercial rebuilding and commercial activity in the construction area that's related to either residential or the building of new office space and related construction. So there's a huge area in the construction trades that we know we could tap into. And many VR clients, individuals coming out of high school or with the capacities to do demanding physical work, are great candidates in many of these jobs, many of these areas. We have also people, for example, with maybe a spinal cord injury who have great fine motor control with their hands. That could go into heavy equipment operations and actually have a crane or a heavy piece of equipment operating area modified for them to use their hands to operate controls. One of the success stories that we had to convince our apprenticeship training office director of was how our talent can do work at various levels, whether it's heavy equipment operation or possibly entrance level physically demanding jobs in the trades. The other large area in Pennsylvania, of course, is health occupations, as it is in all of our states. And this includes nursing and, of course, physicians. As a rehab counselor, I actually had on my caseload a young woman who's gone on to become a pediatrician. And she was a VR customer who received our services. Many allied health professions. And then entrance level areas in the health area, such as medical assistants and attendants and various jobs within the hospital organization. We've worked a lot with various programs and vendors that have developed internships and earn while you learn programs in those settings. And then of course the service sector, which includes, as I've mentioned, logistics, retail, office support, and food services. Next slide, please. So one of the traditional pathways to those careers has been to look at, on an individualized basis, providing job coaching support or guidance and counseling and having individuals apply for a job and working with that specific employer. And looking at the apprentice pipeline and the apprentice approach, we know that individuals can be receiving classroom instruction, be part of a peer group moving towards the career, get the support of that and the comradeship that comes from that. They'll get academic non-paid instruction along with some soft skills training, and then also get the actual hands-on paid employment. So one of the things we did in our initial plan was identify potential pre-apprenticeship pathways that made sense for all of the young people with, depending on their disability and background, coming out of the secondary education system. And that varies from district office to district office and region to region and based on the interest of individuals. But we knew that there were a lot of pathways that we could begin with transition counselors, with family members and parents, directing students in the direction of a earn while you learn experience pre-apprenticeship that could then become an official apprenticeship, which could result in employment in the career a lot faster than maybe the traditional post-secondary route or higher education routes. We did a number of statewide training webinars to educate our VR counselors, as well as sharing that information with consumers through those counselors. And the consumers, our clients, family members, on the benefits of the apprenticeship pathway, the stackable skill credential, the transferable skills that come from having an apprenticeship because they're industry recognized skills, and why that can lead them into a career pathway without the high cost of necessarily higher education. We did outreach to then registered apprenticeship sponsors throughout Pennsylvania with the help of the Apprenticeship Training Office. And what we did was arrange for sponsors to come into a regional district office, meet with those VR counselors, and prior to introducing that particular sponsor and apprenticeship program, we had researched our current district office talent pipeline, which was kind of a record of all the identified goals on the individual's plans for employment. And if we knew we had a fairly high number of individuals that were targeting welding or carpentry or the service industries or hospitalities, it would be productive to bring both the apprenticeship training office representative in, a sponsor of the apprenticeship, to meet with those counselors and discuss how do you apply, what's a good way to prepare for the apprenticeship, what are the steps to apply and then actually enter the apprenticeship, and what would be needed to support the individual throughout the duration of the pre-apprenticeship or the registered apprenticeship. And then lastly, we developed a model to actively support apprenticeship sponsors, and that included using the on-the-job training wage reimbursement piece. We could pay for, at the start of any apprenticeship, 100% of the wages earned during the earn while you learn portion up to 30 days. We'd then supply a midpoint reimbursement to the employer, sort of an attainment point halfway through the apprenticeship, regardless of its length. And then at the end of the apprenticeship, also provide 30 days, 100% OJT. Next slide, please. Now that was a lot of information, but that's just the essence of our plan and how we did things. So in regards to the voc rehab and RA, registered apprenticeship relationship, we engage specific apprenticeship sponsors. And we asked them, are there areas that you wanted to develop a registered apprenticeship? Are there things that you need to understand about the VR population that would make it more accessible? And by having these local meetings with the assistance of the Apprenticeship Training Office, we've made a lot of headway in that area. We have built a specific apprenticeship pipeline in some industries that do build on secondary and post-secondary career trajectories. For example, in central Pennsylvania, a supply chain and warehousing industry came to us with the goal to not only attract people to be in the warehousing associate position, but to at least get 30% of that workforce to include people with disabilities. And we immediately turned to looking at an apprenticeship model, which involves several sponsors. Locally, the Harrisburg Area Community College, a community rehab provider, Goodwill of Central Pennsylvania. Of course, ourselves as a key partner, our local South Central Pennsylvania workforce and development board and the regional American Job Centers. And together we put together a pre-apprenticeship program that was linked to an apprenticeship in the warehousing sector that most of the warehousing companies in central PA have recognized and would be willing to hire someone if they graduate successfully from the pre-apprenticeship. So that company began with cohorts of about 8 weeks, 6 to 9 individuals participating. We've had over 28 individuals from the VR side go through that who've attained a registered apprenticeship. And this is a designation. This is a pre-apprenticeship designation. And of those participants, many were on the autism spectrum. Some had ID, others had a traumatic brain injury, others had physical challenges, but they were able to be accommodated to work within the supply chain warehousing industry and were successful. Next slide, please. So I would recommend you begin by developing and then implementing a statewide plan. Deliver information to your VR counselors about the benefits of a registered apprenticeship and how quickly that can result in a career trajectory into the middle class, depending on that industry and its history with wages and how quickly that industry is growing, what the demand is for people. In the example I just gave, the starting salary upon graduation, full-time with benefits, was at $15.75 for the pre-apprenticeship. The person who would go on, who's 1/3 the way towards the registered apprenticeship, upon graduation from that, in about 2 years, would move up into about $21 an hour. Certainly that's the kinds of incomes that we were after for our folks. Establish funding protocols, like the use of the OJT, if that's flexible enough, and milestone payments to support the many sponsors and the grant funding that goes into creating a registered apprenticeship. Conduct outreach to the registered apprenticeship sponsors and the office in your state that pulls those together. Have them meet locally with each district office and with VR counselors so they understand the how-to. Next slide, please. So in doing this, we created some materials, and the first item that appears on this slide on the right is a brochure that's targeted to really educate traditional trades and sponsors about the value of our talent pipeline. It says, help create a pool of talented youth interested in union trades by becoming a youth mentor. And we were recruiting among the trades through some of our staff in the business service area, specific sponsors who said, you know, we never really looked at the VR talent pipeline before. We need people, we need young people. Tell us how you think they can do this work and what kind of candidates you have. And that has really opened up some doors. So the rest of the narrative goes on to describe how we can pre-screen individuals, we can help individuals apply for the apprenticeships. We can support them to the duration of training, or if it's a pre-apprenticeship, as they would prepare maybe for a particular industry. On the right-hand side of the slide, we have a brochure that talks about internship opportunities. Again, another earn while you learn program that would utilize OJTs. And from the internship conversations, many employers have been recruited by our state's apprenticeship training office to go ahead and look at developing an actual apprenticeship. Last slide, please. So what are some key takeaways? Focus on success and making a good match between the potential VR consumers in your talent pipeline and specific registered apprenticeship programs in your state and their sponsors. It's a good opportunity to really educate sponsors, which I consider a type of employer, about the value and contributions that the VR talent can make to their organization. Start with 1 or 2 VR customers and build upon success. Make those success stories that can be replicated and share that success with the VR counselors. VR counselors often manage individuals going through a 4-year college program, but are bewildered sometimes on how to get started in apprenticeship and how to monitor that through to completion. It's really no different than, in a way, managing a case that goes to college and you have 4 years where you're touching base with the individual and monitoring the progress. It's very similar. So educate VR counselors on the benefits of registered apprenticeships and the high wages that may be present in these careers to move VR consumers into middle-class incomes. And finally, address best practices for monitoring customer progress throughout the experience, frequently touching base with the customer, with the sponsor, and with the employers who hire these folks. Next slide. We're done. Thank you very much, Jackie.
Of course, Ralph, thank you. So we're noticing that there is, just a few minutes left. So we'll try to fit in maybe one question as I put in the comments, and I'll have my email at the end that we are going to gather all the comments or all the questions, and we'll try to have our experts shed some light on them for our follow-up email. I'm seeing a lot of really interesting comments around costs and engaging with workforce development boards, worker voice, employer engagement, all sorts of great things. I guess for one quick question as we wrap up, and then we'll follow up with just, actually real quick, if you want to go to the next slide so we can look at that, that's the kind of key takeaways that we have here. What have you heard from employers about the benefits of accessible apprenticeship programs? Have you spoken to anyone around universal design? Have you been hearing about benefits with this kind of approach?
So Jackie, I can handle that question. It's Mark here. So yeah, that's a great question. It actually pertains, particularly, I can provide one example. As I provided the example in my part, District 1199C is running that group program with multiple employers involved. And one employer in particular that was involved in the onset of the program, they are called SPIN, or Special Peoples in Northeast, and they are an organization that runs various community homes and residential homes and provide support with individuals with intellectual disabilities. So they came into the program, really with the intention to design this apprenticeship program to support that youth population with these lived experiences. But it's through that work they found their support throughout their whole organization and their HR practices and their mentor support lacking in ways that this apprenticeship program was really kind of enhancing that. So really they took their involvement in this program and their lessons learned and applied that organizationally wide. So there's various supports and mentors they have involved in the apprenticeship program now apply throughout their workforce in the organization. So that's kind of one example I can think of where, the intent was to design it for a specific population, but then they found these supports would be good for their entire workforce and start to implement that company-wide.
Jackie, this is Ralph.
Sure,
I just want to add to Mark's
yeah.
comment. Yeah, in the supply chain management, supply chain warehouse that we had developed an pre-apprenticeship with, some of the accommodations used were for the academic part of the training, verbal test-taking skills and group sessions with verbal review of the information, so all participants, including those with ID or TBI, could understand and demonstrate competency with the material. And maybe not thought of so much in terms of universal design, but this particular employer, and for this specific pre-apprenticeship, we coordinated through our workforce partners and everyone a work hours, first shift, and public transportation to and from the location to address the needs with transportation for those who could not drive. So, I think transportation is always a pretty big issue, and you want to bake into any apprenticeship and any pre-apprenticeship how the VR customers are going to get to and from that location.
Thanks, Ralph. And I want to thank you both again for really providing us with a lot of really great examples and great ideas for the work moving forward. For folks still on the call, we appreciate your time here today. We wanted to remind you that we do have plenty of resources available online. And if you want to go to the next slide, you can find my email. My name is Jackie Gonzalez. I'm with JFF, Jobs for the Future. Again, we really appreciate you joining us, and please stay tuned for future resources. And we will follow up with any remaining questions. There were a lot of really interesting ones, so thanks in advance to Mark and Ralph for providing some insight to those. Again, if you can hold on real quick, we'll have a quick poll if you can answer a couple questions as we close out. Thank you everyone again, and have a wonderful afternoon.